Captain Jack Murphy stood tall on the bridge of the U.S. Dauntless, his eyes fixed on the swirling blue and green planet growing larger on the view screen. Arcturus IV was home to the Vexari, an alien species known throughout the galaxy for their advanced technology and even more advanced sense of superiority. "Sir, we're being hailed," said Zoe Miller, the communications specialist. Her fingers moved quickly over her console. Murphy nodded. "Put them through." The screen flickered, revealing a tall, thin alien with pale blue skin and large black eyes. Ambassador Krell of the Vexari High Command didn't bother with pleasantries. "Human vessel, state your purpose in our system." Murphy stepped forward. "This is Captain Jack Murphy of the Earth ship Dauntless. We come in peace as representatives of Earth. We seek to establish formal relations with the Vexari." Krell's expression remained unchanged, but Murphy noticed a slight twitch in the alien's long fingers. "Very well. You may dock at our orbital station. Coordinates are being transmitted." The screen went dark before Murphy could respond. "Well, that wasn't very friendly," said Sam Howard from the tactical station. "They've been in space for 5,000 years," Murphy replied. "We've been out here for less than 50. They see us as children." Murphy turned to his first officer. "Kelly, prepare the diplomatic team. Remember, Earth needs this alliance. The other species in the Concordiate barely acknowledge us. If we can get the Vexari on our side, others will follow." Kelly White nodded and left the bridge to gather the team. 3 hours later, Murphy sat across from Ambassador Krell in a stark, cold meeting room on the Vexari station. The walls were made of a strange metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Your species has only recently discovered faster-than-light travel," Krell said. His voice had an electronic quality to it, coming through the translator. "Yet you wish to be treated as equals." Murphy smiled. "Everyone has to start somewhere, Ambassador. What Earth lacks in experience, we make up for in determination and adaptability." Krell made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Yes, we have observed human history. You are quite aggressive for such a young species." "We prefer to think of it as protective," Murphy countered. "We've had to fight for our survival." The negotiations continued for hours. The Vexari demands grew increasingly unreasonable. They wanted access to all human technology, rights to mine in human-controlled systems, and military bases on the edge of Earth's territory. "These terms are unacceptable," Murphy finally said. "We came seeking a fair partnership." Krell's black eyes narrowed. "Then you came with unrealistic expectations. The Vexari do not partner with primitives. We allow them to exist under our protection." Murphy stood up. "I think we're done here. Earth will seek alliances elsewhere." As Murphy and his team walked back to their shuttle, Krell's voice echoed behind them. "No other species will ally with humans. They all know what we know. You are dangerous and unpredictable." Murphy didn't look back. "Let's go home." They were halfway to their shuttle when alarms blared throughout the station. Red lights flashed along the corridors. "Run," Murphy shouted as armed Vexari guards appeared at the far end of the hallway. The diplomatic team sprinted for the docking bay. Energy weapons fired, leaving scorch marks on the walls around them. Murphy reached the shuttle first and powered up the engines while the others scrambled aboard. 3, 4, he counted as his people rushed in. "Where's Johnson and Harris?" "They were behind us," gasped Kelly White, her face pale with shock. The shuttle sensors showed 2 human life signs fading in the corridor behind them. "We can't leave them," cried Miller. A massive blast rocked the shuttle, cracking the viewport. "We have no choice," Murphy said, his voice tight with anger. "If we stay, we all die." He launched the shuttle, dodging fire from the station's defense systems. As they fled back to the Dauntless, Murphy made a silent promise to the crew members he lost. The Vexari had just made a terrible mistake. They thought humans were weak. They thought humans were primitive. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Admiral Olivia Clark paced the length of the conference room at Sol Command. The curved wall of windows showed Earth below, peaceful and blue. The planet had no idea what news had just arrived from the Arcturus system. Captain Murphy stood at the head of the long table, his face grim as he finished his report. Johnson and Harris are confirmed dead. Williams died in our medical bay before we reached Earth space. The room fell silent. Around the table sat the United Earth Defense Council, 6 men and women with the weight of humanity's future on their shoulders. This was not just a diplomatic failure, Murphy continued. This was a deliberate attack. Admiral Clark stopped pacing. The Vexari claim you violated their security protocols. That's a lie, Murphy said firmly. We followed every instruction to the letter. They waited until we were leaving to attack. They wanted to send a message. Sam Howard, the tactical specialist who had been on the mission, stood up. His right arm was bandaged where a Vexari energy weapon had grazed him. The Vexari didn't expect us to escape, Howard said. They thought their station defenses would destroy our shuttle. They underestimated our piloting skills and our ship's capabilities. Clark looked around the table. Options. Kelly White raised her hand. We could attempt another diplomatic approach through the Concordiate Assembly. Get other species to pressure the Vexari. That would show weakness, Howard countered. The Vexari respect only strength. We need a military response. A war with the Vexari would be suicide, said General Ryan, the oldest member of the council. Their fleet is 100 times the size of ours. The door to the conference room slid open. Alan Grant, head of intelligence, walked in with a data pad. His usual neat appearance was disheveled, suggesting he hadn't slept. Sorry I'm late, Grant said. You all need to see this. He placed the data pad on the table and projected a series of images into the air above them. They showed Vexari warships gathering near the edge of human space. These were taken by our deep space probes over the past month, Grant explained. The Vexari have been planning something big. Based on their movements, we believe they're preparing to attack our colony on Proxima Centauri. Murphy's hands curled into fists. So the diplomatic mission was just a distraction. Or they were assessing our capabilities up close, Grant said. Either way, they never intended peace. Admiral Clark returned to the head of the table. All-out war is not an option, but neither is doing nothing. She turned to Murphy. Captain, what would you recommend? Murphy thought for a moment. A single ship. The Dauntless. Let me take her back to Vexari space and show them that humans are not to be trifled with. One ship against their entire fleet, General Ryan scoffed. That's suicide. Not if we don't try to fight their entire fleet, Murphy said. We can use the element of surprise. They'll never expect a human warship to return so soon, and they certainly won't expect what we can do. Howard nodded eagerly. The new stealth systems are ready for field testing, and the phase cannons could disable their ships without destroying them. Clark studied Murphy's face. This isn't about revenge, is it, Captain? No, ma'am, Murphy replied without hesitation. It's about respect. The Vexari need to understand that attacking humans has consequences. If we do nothing, they'll never take us seriously. Clark was silent for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. Operation Swift Justice is approved, she said. Captain Murphy, you will take the Dauntless back to Arcturus. Your mission is to demonstrate our military capability and secure reparations for our losses. You are not authorized to start a war. Murphy stood straight. Understood, Admiral. As the meeting ended, Howard approached Murphy. Do you think this will work? Murphy watched Earth spinning slowly below them. It has to. Because if it doesn't, that view might not exist much longer. The U.S. Dauntless hummed with activity as the crew prepared for their mission. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Doug Baker crawled through a narrow maintenance shaft, his face smeared with grease. Hand me the plasma coupler, he called to his assistant. Baker had been working for 36 hours straight. The ship needed to be perfect for what lay ahead. He slid out from the shaft and wiped his hands on a rag. The new stealth system is online. he reported into his communicator. "But I don't trust it beyond 12 hours of continuous use." On the bridge, Captain Murphy acknowledged the report. 12 hours should be enough, Chief." Murphy studied the star map displaying their planned route to the Arcturus system. The journey would take 4 days at maximum speed. 4 days to prepare. 4 days to plan. In the weapons bay, Linda Palmer calibrated the ship's advanced phase cannons. These weapons were designed to disable enemy ships without destroying them, perfect for their mission of showing strength without starting a war. "Target practice in 5 minutes," Palmer announced over the ship's communication system. The crew had been handpicked for this mission. Some, like Howard and White, had been with Murphy on the original diplomatic mission. Others were specialists brought in for their particular skills. Zoe Miller spent her time in her quarters, surrounded by recordings of the Vexeri language. As the ship's communication specialist, she needed to understand not just their words, but their thinking. "Computer, replay the Vexeri greeting sequence," she said. The alien sounds filled her room. The Vexeri language had subtle variations in tone that could change a greeting into a threat. Miller needed to master those nuances if they were to have any psychological advantage. In the medical bay, Dr. Peter Jones prepared for potential casualties. He hoped his services wouldn't be needed, but hope wasn't a strategy. "More burn treatments," he told the medical computer. The Vexeri weapons caused tissue damage similar to third-degree burns. Jones had treated the survivors from the diplomatic mission. He had seen what Vexeri weapons could do. He wouldn't be caught unprepared again. Murphy called the senior officers to the tactical room. The walls displayed 3-dimensional images of Vexeri ships and defense systems. "The Vexeri rely on numbers," Sam Howard explained. "Their individual ships are less advanced than ours, but they typically attack in groups of 5 or more." Kelly White pointed to a particular ship design. "This is their command vessel. It coordinates their fleet movements. If we can isolate it, we can disrupt their entire battle strategy." Murphy nodded. "That's our primary target then." "What if they call for reinforcements?" Palmer asked. "Intelligence suggests the Vexeri are stretched thin," Murphy replied. "They've committed most of their fleet to the planned invasion of Proxima Centauri. That's why our timing must be perfect." The meeting continued for hours as they refined their approach. When it ended, Murphy remained alone in the tactical room, studying the Vexeri homeworld. The door opened, and Kelly White entered. "You should get some rest, Captain." Murphy shook his head. 3 crew members died because I led them into a trap. I won't let that happen again." "It wasn't your fault," White said. "We all believed the diplomatic mission would succeed." "That's the problem with humans," Murphy replied. "We always expect others to think like us, to value the same things we do." White was silent for a moment. "What do the Vexeri value?" "Power," Murphy said simply. "So that's the language we'll speak to them." The Dauntless continued its journey through hyperspace, a lone ship carrying the hopes of humanity. The crew trained relentlessly, running combat simulations and emergency drills. In his quarters, Murphy recorded a message to be sent to Earth if the mission failed. He ended it with words that he hoped would never need to be heard. "If we do not return, do not send another ship. Evacuate the colonies and prepare Earth for war. The Vexeri will not stop with one victory." He closed the recording and tried to sleep. In 3 days, they would reach Arcturus. In 3 days, they would learn if one human ship could change the course of history. The U.S. Dauntless dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Arcturus system. The bridge was silent as the crew took in the view on the main screen. The blue-green planet of the Vexeri homeworld hung in the distance, surrounded by orbital stations and defense platforms. "Stealth systems engage," reported Doug Baker from engineering. "We're invisible to their sensors for now." Captain Murphy nodded. "Good. Let's move in slowly. Linda, keep weapons on standby but not charge. We don't want to alert them." The Dauntless slid forward, a ghost among the stars. Around them, Vexeri patrol ships moved in standard formations, unaware of the human vessel in their midst. "They're confident," observed Sam Howard. "No irregular patrol patterns. They don't expect any threats here." Kelly White monitored the sensor readings. "I'm picking up heavy ship traffic near their main space station. Looks like a celebration of some kind." Murphy's eyes narrowed. "Magnify that area." The screen zoomed in on a massive space station orbiting the Vexari homeworld. Dozens of ships were docked there, and lights flashed in patterns that suggested festivities. "Zoe, can you pick up any transmissions? Find out what they're celebrating." Miller adjusted her communications equipment and listened intently. After a moment, her face paled. "Sir, they're celebrating their upcoming invasion of human space. They're calling it the primitive cleansing." A cold silence fell over the bridge. Murphy's jaw tightened. "Well," he said quietly, "let's change their festive mood." He stood and straightened his uniform. "Zoe, open a channel to the entire Vexari system. Make sure everyone hears this." "Channel open, sir." Murphy looked directly at the view screen. "Attention, people of Arcturus. This is Captain Jack Murphy of the Earth vessel U.S. Dauntless. 3 of my crew were murdered during a peaceful diplomatic mission to your world. You believe humans are primitive and weak. You are planning to attack our colonies." He paused. "You have made a grave miscalculation." As he spoke, Baker disabled the stealth systems. The Dauntless suddenly appeared on Vexari sensors, less than 10,000 miles from their main defense station. Alarms blared across the Vexari system. Patrol ships changed course, racing toward the human vessel. "Sir, we're being hailed by Vexari High Command," Miller reported. "Put them through." The screen changed to show Ambassador Krell, his blue face dark with rage. "How dare you enter our system uninvited? Your ship will be destroyed for this violation." Murphy smiled coldly. "I think not. Ambassador, you should look more closely at your defense station." While Murphy had been speaking, Linda Palmer had targeted the station's weapons systems with pinpoint accuracy. Before Krell could respond, Palmer fired. 5 precise shots hit 5 critical points on the station. The massive weapons that could have destroyed the Dauntless went dark. "What have you done?" Krell demanded. "Demonstrated human precision," Murphy replied. "We could have destroyed your station. Instead, we merely disarmed it. Unlike you, we don't kill unless necessary." 3 Vexari patrol ships moved into attack position. Howard highlighted them on the tactical display. "They're preparing to fire, Captain." "Evasive pattern Delta," Murphy ordered. The Dauntless moved with incredible speed, spinning and twisting in ways the Vexari ships couldn't match. Their shots went wide, missing the human vessel entirely. "Now, Linda, show them what we can do." Palmer fired again. 1, 2, 3 shots. Each hit a patrol ship's engine section, disabling them without causing catastrophic damage. The ships drifted, powerless but intact. On the screen, Krell's expression had changed from anger to something new, concern. "You cannot defeat our entire fleet," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We don't need to defeat your entire fleet," Murphy replied. "We just need you to understand what will happen if you attack human worlds." More Vexari ships appeared on the sensors, approaching from all directions. "Sir," Howard said quietly, "they're surrounding us." Murphy smiled. "Exactly as planned. Phase 2, everyone. Let's show the Vexari what happens when they corner a human." The bridge of the Dauntless hummed with tension as the crew watched Vexari warships closing in from all directions. On the main screen, the enemy vessels looked like hungry predators surrounding their prey. 37 ships and counting, Sam Howard reported from the tactical station. His voice remained calm despite the odds against them. Captain Murphy studied the 3-dimensional display showing their position. The Vexari were forming a sphere around the Dauntless, leaving no apparent escape route. "They're using standard encirclement tactics," Howard observed, "just like in the training simulations." Murphy nodded. "And what did we learn about Vexari encirclement tactics, Lieutenant?" They always leave a thin point in their formation opposite their flagship. They never think anyone would be bold enough to charge directly at their strongest ships. Murphy smiled. Exactly. Helm, set course for the Vexari flagship. Full speed. The crew exchanged glances. Kelly White spoke up from her station. Sir, that's taking us deeper into their trap. Sometimes the best way out is through, Murphy replied. Zoe, broadcast on all frequencies. I want the Vexari to hear this. Miller opened the channel. Ready, sir. Murphy's voice rang with authority. Vexari fleet, this is your only warning. The U.S. Dauntless is leaving this system. Any ship that fires upon us will be disabled. Any ship that blocks our path will be rammed. You have 30 seconds to clear a path. The Dauntless surged forward, its engines glowing bright blue as it accelerated toward the largest Vexari vessel. On the screen, Ambassador Krell appeared again. You bluff human. Your single ship cannot defeat our fleet. Surrender now, and your crew will be treated humanely. Murphy ignored him. Linda, target the lead ships. Doug, divert power to forward shields. The Vexari ships didn't move aside. Instead, they tightened their formation, weapons charging. They're going to fire, Howard warned. Now, Linda. Palmer fired the phase cannons in a precise pattern, not at the ships directly ahead, but at the vessels on the edges of their path. The energy beams struck with surgical precision, disabling weapons and engines, but causing no catastrophic damage. The Dauntless shot through the gap created by the disabled ships, heading straight for the heart of the Vexari fleet. They're firing. White called out. Energy blasts from a dozen Vexari ships converged on the Dauntless. The shields flared bright white as they absorbed the assault. Shields at 60%, Baker reported from engineering. We can't take much more of this. Murphy watched the tactical display. The Vexari ships were breaking formation to pursue them, exactly as he had hoped. Helm, set course for the asteroid field at the edge of the system. Maximum speed. The Dauntless changed direction sharply, leaving the confused Vexari fleet scrambling to follow. They're pursuing, Howard confirmed. All of them. Murphy turned to Baker on the view screen from engineering. Are the packages ready? Baker held up a small metallic device. Ready and waiting, Captain. 20 modified mining charges, each with an electromagnetic pulse strong enough to disable a cruiser. The Dauntless raced toward a dense field of asteroids at the edge of the system. The Vexari fleet followed, their formation less orderly now as each captain vied to be the one to capture the human vessel. They're gaining on us, White warned. Murphy nodded. Good, let them think they're winning. The Dauntless dove into the asteroid field. While most ships would have slowed down to navigate the dangerous terrain, the human vessel increased speed, weaving between the massive rocks with impossible precision. Deploy the packages, Murphy ordered. From the rear of the Dauntless, 20 small objects shot out, scattering among the asteroids. The Vexari ships, focused on their pursuit, didn't notice the devices. All packages deployed, Baker confirmed. Ready on your command. The lead Vexari ships entered the asteroid field, pushing their engines to keep up with the nimble human vessel. Now, Murphy said quietly. Baker pressed a button. Across the asteroid field, the 20 devices activated simultaneously, sending out waves of electromagnetic energy. The pulse washed over the Vexari fleet like an invisible tide. One by one, the enemy ships went dark. Engines failed. Weapons systems shut down. Life support switched to emergency power. In less than a minute, 30 Vexari warships drifted helplessly among the asteroids. Murphy allowed himself a small smile. Phase 2 complete. Set course for the Vexari flagship, the ship that escaped our little trap. Howard looked up from his console. Sir, the flagship is retreating to the homeworld. They're running, White said with disbelief. Not for long, Murphy replied. The real message is about to be delivered. The Vexari flagship raced toward the safety of their homeworld's defense grid, Behind it, the U.S. Dauntless followed steadily, gaining ground with each passing minute. On the bridge, Captain Murphy watched the distance between the ships shrink. They're pushing their engines beyond safety limits, Doug Baker observed from engineering. They're desperate. Murphy nodded. And desperate enemies make mistakes. He turned to address his crew. The next part of our mission is the most dangerous. We need to board that flagship and capture their fleet commander. Linda Palmer looked up from her weapons console. Board their ship. With what force? We have a crew of 87. We don't need an army, Murphy replied. Just a small, elite team. He turned to Sam Howard. Lieutenant, select 5 of our best Marines. You'll lead the boarding party. Howard stood straighter. Yes, sir. I'm going to, said Zoe Miller from her communication station. You'll need someone who understands their language and systems. Murphy considered this, then nodded. Approved. Linda, you'll go as well. We need your weapons expertise. The captain tapped the ship's communications. Sergeant Frank Collins to the bridge. Minutes later, a tall, muscular man with a close-cropped haircut arrived. Collins was the leader of the ship's Marine unit, with 15 years of combat experience. Sir, he said with a crisp salute. Sergeant, prepare your team for a boarding action. Special equipment, limited engagement protocols. We want prisoners, not casualties. Collins nodded. Understood, sir. We'll be ready in 10 minutes. While the boarding team prepared, the Dauntless continued its pursuit. The Vexari flagship was almost within range of the homeworld's defenses, but it wouldn't make it in time. Target their engine section, Murphy ordered. Disable, don't destroy. Palmer fired a precise shot that hit the flagship's main propulsion system. The massive Vexari vessel slowed dramatically, drifting in space. Direct hit, Palmer reported. Their engines are offline. Murphy nodded. Bring us alongside. Prepare the boarding pods. In the launch bay, Howard, Miller, Palmer, and 5 Marines, led by Sergeant Collins, climbed into 2 sleek boarding pods. These small vessels were designed to attach to enemy ships and cut through their hulls. Remember, Howard told the team, we need to reach the bridge and secure the fleet commander. Miller will guide us through their systems. Palmer will handle any weapons we encounter. Marines provide security and muscle. What about the crew? Asked one of the Marines. There must be hundreds on that ship. Non-lethal tactics only, Collins reminded them. Stun grenades and tranquilizer rounds. We're here to make a point, not start a war. The boarding pods launched from the Dauntless, crossing the short distance to the Vexari flagship in seconds. They attached to the hull with magnetic clamps and began cutting through the metal. Alarms blared throughout the Vexari ship as the boarding pods breached the hull. Armed Vexari rushed to repel the invaders, but they were unprepared for human tactics. Howard led the first team through the breach. The corridor was filled with armed Vexari, their energy weapons aimed and ready. Miller stepped forward and spoke in the Vexari language. Lower your weapons or be disabled. We seek only your commander. The Vexari responded with weapons fire. Energy bolts flashed down the corridor toward the humans. Collins tossed 2 stun grenades that exploded with blinding light and disorienting sound. The Marines moved in, firing tranquilizer rounds that dropped the Vexari guards without killing them. This way to the bridge, Miller said, consulting a small device that mapped the ship's layout. 2 decks up. The team moved efficiently through the ship, encountering resistance at every turn, but overcoming it with superior tactics and non-lethal weapons. Palmer disabled the internal security systems, giving them free movement through the vessel. After 15 minutes of fighting, they reached the bridge. The doors were sealed, but Palmer made quick work of the lock mechanism. Ready? Howard asked, looking at each team member. They nodded, weapons prepared. Howard pressed the door control. The massive doors slid open to reveal the Vexari bridge crew, and in the center, Fleet Commander Vrex, the second highest military leader in the Vexari hierarchy. Commander Vrex stood tall, his blue skin dark with rage. "How dare you board a Vexari military vessel? This is an act of war." Howard stepped forward, his weapon lowered but ready. "No, Commander. This is a lesson." Behind them, the Marines secured the bridge crew without firing a shot. Most of the Vexari were too shocked by the human presence to resist. "Your fleet is disabled," Howard continued. "Your flagship is captured. And now, you are coming with us to meet Captain Murphy." The grand hall of the Vexari High Command was silent as Captain Jack Murphy walked in with Fleet Commander Vrex at his side. The room was filled with the blue-skinned alien leaders, their large eyes following the humans' every move. Murphy stopped in the center of the hall and looked around at the assembled Vexari. None of them had ever seen a human in person before. They had only heard stories of the primitive species that had recently joined the galactic community. "Members of the Vexari High Command," Murphy began, his voice steady and confident. "I stand before you today because you left me no choice. 3 of my crew were murdered during a diplomatic mission. Your fleet was preparing to attack our colonies." Commander Vrex stood rigid beside Murphy, his pride wounded but his fear evident. "Your finest warships now drift powerless in your asteroid field," Murphy continued. "Your flagship has been captured by a boarding party of just 8 humans, and your fleet commander stands beside me as proof of our victory." One of the Vexari leaders rose from his seat. His ornate clothing marked him as the High Chancellor, the supreme leader of their species. "You have made your point, human," the High Chancellor said. "What are your demands?" "Our surrender." Murphy shook his head. "Earth does not seek your surrender or your destruction. We seek only what we originally came for, respect and recognition as equals." He pulled out a small device and projected an image in the air. It showed the disabled Vexari ships being towed by human vessels that had just arrived in the system. "Those are Earth rescue ships," Murphy explained. "They are saving your stranded crews and repairing your vessels. We could have left them to die. That is what you would have done to us." The High Chancellor's eyes widened slightly. "You helped those who attacked you." "That is the human way," Murphy replied. "We fight when we must, but we prefer peace. We protect our own, but we do not seek the destruction of others." From the back of the hall, a new voice spoke. "And that is why Earth is worthy of our respect." Admiral Olivia Clark walked forward, accompanied by a small delegation of human officials. She had arrived with the rescue fleet, ready to negotiate once Murphy had made humanity's strength clear. "High Chancellor," Clark said with a respectful nod. "I am Admiral Clark of Earth's fleet. I come with the authority to negotiate a peace treaty between our worlds." The High Chancellor studied her for a long moment. "You orchestrated this demonstration of force." Clark glanced at Murphy. Captain Murphy and his crew showed remarkable restraint. They could have destroyed your fleet. Instead, they disabled it with minimal casualties. That was by design. She stepped forward and placed a data pad on the table before the High Chancellor. "These are our terms. They are the same as our original proposal. Fair trade, mutual respect, and non-aggression. The only addition is compensation for our 3 murdered crew members." The High Chancellor took the pad and read it carefully. The hall remained silent as he considered the terms. Finally, he looked up. "The Vexari have existed for thousands of years. In that time, we have encountered many species. Some we conquered, some we ignored. None have done what you have done. Defeat our fleet, and then offer peace." He handed the pad to an aide. "We accept your terms, humans, and we will honor them." Commander Vrex stepped forward. "High Chancellor, these humans, they fight differently than any species we have encountered. They could have killed my entire crew. Instead, they used weapons that only stunned us." The High Chancellor nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps we have much to learn from Earth after all." As the formal proceedings began, Murphy found himself standing beside Admiral Clark. "You cut it close, Admiral," he said quietly. "Another hour, and I'd have had to start making up diplomatic protocols." Clark smiled slightly. "I wanted to give you time to make an impression. Based on the looks on their faces, I'd say you succeeded. Murphy glanced around the hall. Other alien representatives were arriving, drawn by news of the conflict. They looked at the humans with new interest and respect. Will it last? Murphy asked. This peace? That depends on them, Clark replied. But they'll remember what happened here. They never expected a human warship. Murphy nodded. And by the time they saw one, it was too late. Around them, the future of human-Vexari relations was taking shape. A new chapter in galactic history had begun, one where humans would no longer be dismissed as primitives, but respected as equals. And it had all started with a single ship that refused to back down.